Arab world. These questions have been asked for many years, and these are not new questions. So, as a perspective, if you look to the larger picture, Turkey is moving to a certain direction, and it has always been the European direction. It will continue like this. The second dimension of our policy is, of course, having a strong relationship with the neighboring region. But when we say strong relationship, we think that based on our democratic credentials, we think that, and we strongly believe that we have to create a type of democracy and stability just among our borders. Everyone knows the famous democratic peace theory. Without having credible partners and democratic partners as neighbors, we will continue to have problems in our geography. We are aware of that. So we think that we have to promote legitimate regimes in our vicinity. Now, I will talk about this in our Arab Spring and Middle East portion of my intervention. But in any case, we saw we dearly paid the price to wait and see what's going on in the Middle East. We can not have the luxury to follow events in our south. That's why we are trying to be proactive, to try to encourage regimes in our south to move towards democracy and legitimacy. The third, of course, objective of the foreign policy is to do with our economic and trade ties. This has become an increasingly important factor in our foreign policy. So our foreign policy is not moving only on political and strategic considerations, and more recently on economic and commercial considerations as well. So wherever we have markets, our foreign policy is moving side by side with this. This we can see it also in the recent openings of Turkish missions and embassies, which actually represent this pattern of moving along with more trade to a country than take your embassy there, increase your trade, connect there with the Turkish airlines, and etc. So this economic and commercial rationale is increasingly becoming an important factor in our foreign policy. Thanks to this, in the last 10 years, our trade with our neighboring regions has increased threefold, which is a very big increase actually. One important objective, again, of the Turkish foreign policy is to do with terrorism and radicalism. Turkey has suffered from terrorism for too many decades, and still suffers actually from that. And in our current context, we are having newly emerged radical terrorist groups, including Daesh or Islamic State, as popularly known. So we are trying to fight with terrorism because it directly affects our national security as well. And the final objective, if I may cherry pick, is the energy security. Because Turkey, as you know, is an economic powerhouse, but we have no energy resources for ourselves. Hydrocarbon resources, I think. We don't have our oil and gas, and we are overwhelmingly dependent on exports, on imports, on energy. So securing our energy needs is one of the fundamental priorities of the Turkish foreign policy. So whenever you see Nabucco or Turkish Stream or South Stream, whatever it is, then inevitably Turkey has its own foreign policy that might sometimes differ from what our European friends are pursuing. We can also touch this issue if you're interested in the Q&A session. So when we come on concrete issues about the Middle East, of course when you talking about the Middle East, again, if you can have a map, there are at least 10 different factors and countries that you have to focus on. The history of the Middle East, the recent history at least, is one dominated with misery and unfortunate blood. In the history, Middle East were the center that gave people or the humanity many positive things. But unfortunately, in the last century, if you may say. It has always been a venue for human distress. And anything that happens in the Middle East directly affects Turkey's national security as well. So we are an active part of what is happening in this region. And because of the geography, history, and cultural links that I mentioned in the beginning, Turkey cannot ignore or cannot remain indifferent to what's happening in the Middle East. That's why we have been active for too long in this region. We have lived together with the Arab peoples in the region for centuries, as we heard multiple times. We know their reflexes, we know the realities on the ground, and we know how difficult and how complex the Middle East is. And we are trying our best to share this experience with our Western partners, to try to somehow find solutions to this miserable, if I may say, situation. We believe that in order to ensure peace and stability for the long run in this region, we have to have legitimate governments and nations in the region. Of course, this brings the issue of Arab Spring. In the first year or first months of the Arab Spring, we all had some positive expectations about the region. We were so happy that the dynamics of change has started in the region and we started to support this dynamic. But after 2 years, now what we see is a very dark picture, a bleak picture in the region. And people now asking, did we make the right thing in the region by promoting democracy and etc. From the very beginning, when we were saying about change in the Middle East, beginning from 2003, and I will now give some examples about this, we were saying, yes, change is necessary, it cannot go like this, but there should be some principles to change. First of all, the change and reform must primarily be fueled from the internal dynamics. So rather than putting things from above or parachute things from above, it should come from the domestic conditions and dynamics. Second, we were telling them that conditions and sensitivities of each country should be taken into consideration. When you talk about Middle East, when you talk about Arab countries, it's not a unique monotone or simple entity. So Lebanon, for example, is quite different than Syria. It's quite different than Saudi Arabia. It's totally different than Yemen, for instance. So it should be tailor-made proposals or projects to each country. Third, when we're saying again about the change, reforms should not be forced or imposed from outside. Encouragement is fine, but you should, and you cannot actually impose anything, which we saw clearly. Fourth, we were arguing that the democratization process may advance at different speeds. You should not push countries to move forward quite speedily. Fifth, one of the most important aspects of change should be local ownership. So people of these countries should locally own a project of change, and it should be voluntarily participated. And of course, we were always underlining the very fact that Arab-Israeli conflict should definitely be resolved in order for any change to be meaningful in the region, because it was a conflict that is actually feeding radicalism in the Middle East for many years. If you check the slogans of any radical movement in the country, they first go to Palestine, fight over the Arabs in the region, etc. So first, we have to resolve this question we were saying. Back in 2003, where there was no Arab Spring, no change in the Middle East, and nothing, the Turkish foreign minister made a very strong speech at the OIC ministerial meeting in Tehran. So more than 50 countries were present at this meeting, and it was in Iran. The Turkish foreign minister was so courageous and said, listen, we are having a strong problem, a big problem in our societies. We have to change. the modern values are compatible with our Islamic traditional values. We cannot shy away from our responsibilities. We have to find legitimate governments in our countries. These advisors back in 2003, 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago now, was so courageous and powerful calls to the Middle Eastern and Arab leaders, also the Islamic leaders, including the leadership.